Hey everybody, welcome to Drive Thru Review 379. Today we're going to talk about Roll Through the Ages, the Iron Age. And this is the sequel to Roll Through the Ages, the Bronze Age. And you can see the original Roll Through the Ages was designed by Matt Leacock, who designed Pandemic and Forbidden Island. But this particular one gives design credit to Tom Lehman, who did Race for the Galaxy and Roll for the Galaxy and all kinds of other good stuff. And it is very much based on the same engine of the original Roll Through the Ages. It's kind of a Yahtzee style dice game. You roll some dice and you get a couple of re-rolls, and you're going to be marking different things on tracks like armies, workers, and food, and all kinds of stuff like that. Well, I should say spending workers to add to your armies and different things. And then the players are going to get a huge sheet or set of sheets for some of the different keeping score and keeping track of your civilization. So let's jump into how the mechanics work, and I'll come back and tell you what I think of it. Okay, now here's everything that you can get in the box, and one thing I am not sure of is this particular edition included the Mediterranean expansion. So you can see there are tool sets of rules, and they're very small 4-page rule sets here, so very quick and easy to digest the rules. And so it also comes in this case with the Mediterranean expansion, which includes an actual map, which is cool in a civilization game sometimes because it's nice to kind of see geographically which areas you're colonizing and so forth. So I will talk about the Mediterranean expansion more in a bit, but if you just get the base game, you're going to have 4 of these very nice wooden placards, just like the original Roll Through the Ages, but a little bit different style of resources that you're going to be keeping track of. And you also get these little pegs, which are very nice. You can track food and goods, armies, navy ships, and then here's like your treasure, sort of like your little bank. And then if you do get the Mediterranean expansion, you will get some extra of these pegs to mark on the Mediterranean board there. And then of course, like I said, you do get these huge sheets of paper, and the Mediterranean one is slightly different than if you're playing with the base game. So if you are playing with the Mediterranean one, you have to use this particular sheet here. Now this game does play solo, and I'll give you a quick spoiler of my review. I hate playing this solo. I don't think it really works at all. I do like it with people actually. So anyway, all you need in the game is to play with this and some dice and then your sheet of paper, and everybody gets that. And then on your turn, of course, you're going to be rolling dice, and that's going to be based on some of the things that you're going to be marking here. Here, let's take a look at a blank one, and I'll kind of show you what a filled out one might look like. So the first thing to note that you're going to have to choose before you even start the game is choosing to get an extra port or an extra province. You'll actually circle this and then fill in all of the little goods and the little worker space there, the square, and then you'll have an extra port to start the game. Or you can choose to start with an extra province, and you can see that's going to give you +2 armies and +1 tribute, which tribute is basically a victory point. And it's also though going to require you to feed more. At the end of every round, you've got to feed one province or one food for each province that you've filled out there. Now the port's interesting because it's going to give you more goods if you roll the shipping die. So you're going to make that choice there, and you can see you're going to start with actually rolling 2 dice on your turn. So you're going to roll 2 of these normal dice as well as this 1 special die. You'll always roll this die on your turn. And then as you get more ports or more provinces, whichever one you get first, then you'll add another die to your roll. And so you can choose to go and get a whole bunch of ports and kind of ignore the provinces, or get the provinces, or kind of go a little bit of both. But as soon as you get something in this column and fill it out completely, and then you're going to add a new die to your supply, which will give you more options and cool stuff to do. So what do you do on your turn? Well, very simply, you're going to take and roll all the dice. So let's say we've got here 3 dice that we're going to roll. Again, we always roll the special dice. So you roll those, and then you now have the option to re-roll 2 more times. So if I didn't like what I saw here, maybe I didn't like these 2, I could re-roll those, and then I could re-roll whatever I wanted to again. Now, if you ever get this little skull icon here, this is locked and has to be set aside, and you can't re-roll that for the rest of the turn, and this will likely cause something bad to happen to you. But what do all the icons and symbols mean? Well, let's ignore here this special die for just a second, and we'll look at all the normal die. These are all the same. you get 3 food for this icon, and you go ahead and track the food here. Now food you can spend in a variety of things, and also remember you have to have 1 food at the end of the turn for each province, or you're going to have to take a negative victory point. Now sometimes you may roll a side like this that gives you the choice. You can either choose to take 2 food or have 2 workers. Now the workers you don't actually mark on your track. You have them to spend this turn, and whatever you don't spend you lose. So you can also here roll 3 workers, and again those are use them or lose them. The other thing here is you can get goods or shipping, and you get 1 good per port that you filled in. So if you start the game and you chose province as your first bonus, you'd only get 1 good, but if you went the shipping route you'd get two goods on when you rolled that. The next thing to note is this is the innovation side. You can see the little flame there. Now flames are interesting because they sort of count as goods, but only when you're spending and getting a development. So if we look down here, you can see a number of different developments that you can get. Now each of the innovations counts, you can see, as 3 goods. So when you go to buy in a development, which I'll talk about more in a second, you can spend goods, innovation, or wealth. So the innovation is sort of like a special good only used for developments. Now the other thing to note here are these disaster icons. So again, you have to not roll those once you get them, but they do provide you a little bit of something. You do get a good and a worker for this turn. Now as you possibly roll more of these, well, that's going to get worse and worse outcomes for you, and sometimes just like the original game, if you roll 3 you get a worse outcome for everybody else. Now the interesting little addition here is this little bonus die, or fate die I should call it, and these have some different icons on here, and these are sometimes going to interact with what you've rolled on your turn. This is a nice little addition to the game. Now the first thing to note here is the sun, so it's sort of like a drought, and what that's going to do is reduce the amount of food that a particular die or set of die will produce. So each of these dice now is going to produce 1 less food than it normally would. So this only gives you 2 food, and this one only gives you 1 if you end up with the drought icon. Now conversely, we have the abundance icon there, and that gives each of these dice adding +1 food. So this will give you 4 and then 3 food there. Now your fate die also has a disaster / good / worker icon as well. And then you have my favorite side, which is this one here. This is an omen. This allows you to change, after you're done re-rolling, any of the die faces to whatever you want. So that's awesome, of course. And then we have 2 other pieces here. We have the Battle for Conquest, which I'll talk about in a second, and then the Demand Tribute from Opponents here, which is, both of these have to do with your army. So what you're going to do is you're going to roll on your turn, and then once you're frozen, let's say we had this, then you're going to evaluate what you've got, collecting goods and the food, and denoting how many workers you have for the turn. And then you have to immediately feed. So again, 1 food on your board there has to be spent for each province that you have. You're going to resolve any disaster. So this is going to change up based on the number that you roll. So if you roll 1, you're going to lose a victory point. If you have 2, you actually battle. Instead of losing 2 victory points now, you actually battle against sort of a conquest. If you roll 3, just like in the original game, it's a pestilence, and everybody else loses 3 points, which is fun. And then you lose 4 points, and so on. So after you've fed and then resolved any of your disasters, you're going to have to resolve any battles or tributes or anything like that at that point. So to start the game, everybody starts with 1 army. You can see that there, and it says to start with that. And then you're always going to be comparing that number to a little conquest track here on your sheet, or comparing your army to other players' armies. So let's say we rolled a conquest or a battle dice. So we're going to resolve that battle sort of against ourselves. So let's say we had here, just for fun, we had 4 armies at some point, and then we're going to compare that to our 1. So we're going to look at the difference there. So we've got 4 to 1, so we got 3. Now we're going to fill in the tribute here, and we're going to get 3 points basically. And if anything, like from a disaster, or you can't feed, I didn't mention that actually, so if you can't feed a province, you're going to lose 1 point for each province that you couldn't feed. So whenever you get the disasters or you can't feed, you fill in these negative points, and these count as -1 at the end of the game. And these will count as +1. So back to the battle here. So we are 4 to 1. So the difference of that is 3. So we're going to 1, 2, 3, and that's going to be 3 victory points for us. Now sometimes you can count your ships if you get ships, and there's little developments and things that you can get that'll add bonuses to your army, and then you're going to reduce your army and or your ships there by 1. and then you're going to mark up now a new level of conquest. So the next time that you fight them, you're going to have to fight a little bit harder horde, so to speak. And again, if you lose, this sort of starts to build up on you. Let's say we've got 5 conquests and you don't have quite enough, you're actually going to again take negative points or disaster points there. And the tribute is an interesting little die roll there. You're going to take your army and compare it to everybody else. Anybody that you're equal to or less than, nothing's going to happen. But for everybody that you have army greater than, you're going to gain 1 point again in the difference, and mark that here on your sheet that you have more army than them. But there's really no negative outcome, so to speak, for anybody with this tribute. So once you've resolved, again, defeating the disasters and then any battles that you might have had to do, then you can build stuff. So you can build a army for 1 food and then 1 population. Again, track the food here, the workers you just kind of spend there. You can actually build ships if you've built the shipbuilding development. And speaking of developments, you can buy 1 development per turn. So let's take a closer look at those. So again, here you can spend your goods and your innovation and so on here. And here's the cost. Here's the victory points these will give you at the end of the game. And then these are the cool special abilities that they're going to give you. So not only are you going to hopefully get more dice through getting ships and, ports and provinces, you're also going to get some new cool abilities from here. And these are pretty similar to the original game, if I recall correctly, but you can buy 1 of these per turn. Now the other thing you can do with workers is you can spend them and fill in these monuments. And so here you can see once you fill in all of those, whoever the first one to fill it in gets this amount of victory points, and then everybody else, once they fill it in, will get a reduced amount of victory points there. Another thing you can do here is you can spend workers to fill these in, and then this way you can then colonize these other provinces, and then fill workers and spend goods to get more ships. So you kind of like need ships and need goods to get more goods kind of thing. So once you fill those in, you can do all that and spend all that, but again, you can only buy 1 development on your turn. Now the other interesting thing that you can do is you can actually store good as wealth. So at a cost of 4 to 1, you can get 1 wealth, but then when you spend the wealth on your turn, then it actually gives you 5. So let's say I had here, I don't know, 8 goods. So I can convert that into 2 wealth. I could spend all that and then hopefully get some more goods on my later turn by doing shipping or whatever. And then when I go to spend this wealth, it's actually going to return to me in cost or spend as 5 goods. And you're just going to be taking turns that way. So each player is going to kind of take their turn off on their own, 1 at a time, going around the table. There's a short and a long game. The game will end, if you're playing the short game, if all but 1 of the monuments is built, or somebody gets to 30 points or 30 tributes, or somebody builds their 5th development. And there's a longer game where the thresholds for those are all increased. And then you tally up your victory points. Again, you get victory points for developments, for the different monuments you might build, and then you basically take the tribute and subtract all the disasters from there. And any wealth that you have stored over is going to give you 2 victory points per wealth, and then whoever has the most victory points is the winner. Now there is also the addition of the Mediterranean expansion, and this works a little bit differently. So you add this new board, you get a new set of these sheets, and it comes with shipbuilding. So everybody has the ability to build ships right away. You don't need to get the shipbuilding development to be able to build ships. I'm not sure if I said that, but you do. So what you do if you want to colonize here, you have to actually spend workers, and you're going to mark workers in these little spots there, and you can see that each of these has a number of spaces that you can put stuff in. Now to put the last worker in that spot, you have to spend a worker, but you've also got to spend a ship, and then now you are considered to control this particular colony. So in this case, Mastia. Now as soon as you control that, you're going to immediately get whatever the indicated goods are. So you might have 2 goods, you might get an innovation, you might get some food and so on. And there's also a new development, let's find it here, metallurgy, and this will give you 1 point per mine. So you can see some of these have these mines on them, so they're going to give you some extra points. You also will get 3 points per colony that you can control, and you can kind of steal colonies from people. So if I had started this one, if you spent an extra worker beyond what you needed to colonize it, you could steal it from me, which is kind of an interesting thing. So it adds a map that gives you a little bit more of a grounded geographical civilization feel, and it's got something else to do with ships and changed up the game just slightly. Okay, so that is Roll Through the Ages, the Iron Age. What do I think of it? Well, a little history. I didn't really care for the original Roll Through the Ages. It was like a little too light for me, I think. And frankly, I'm a little burned out on the whole Yahtzee idea. So I like the games that have a little bit more to them than just regular old Yahtzee. So I didn't really have super high hopes for this one, but this one does give you, even without the Mediterranean expansion, a fair amount of more choices. And that kind of makes sense because you're sort of progressing, through civilization from the Bronze Age to the Iron Age. So you're going to have more capabilities and things. So just the whole idea of the ports versus the provinces is very interesting to me. And I find that that's kind of the most cool part of the game, is you can sit there and play it again and again and again and kind of play with how you build that up and kind of go for like a pure port strategy or a pure province strategy, or kind of do a mix of it. And you can play with the different developments and things that you can buy and see how that goes. You can kind of go for a monument strategy. So there's a lot to kind of chew on there. I think it's just that one or two extra layers of decisions that make me like this game, where I didn't really like the other Roll Through the Ages game. Now, what did I think of the Mediterranean expansion? Well, this kind of leads into the thing I don't like about this game or the original game, is it's kind of solitary, right? So I roll dice and wait for you to finish your turn. And I said at the beginning, I didn't really like it solitaire. I kind of expected I would like it if I was going to like it at all solitaire, but the rules for it are just kind of, I don't know, you get 7 rounds or whatever it is, and then you just kind of go for a high score. It's okay, but I like having the other people there because you're racing against somebody's sort of decision making, and that just kind of blows away the AI of this. And I wouldn't even call it AI, it's just like random solitaire variant, to me. But the thing is, if you play with like 4 players, it takes a little too long because, again, you're just sitting there rolling dice waiting for your turn to come around. So the sweet spot for me is a 2 or 3 player game. Perfectly fine 2 or 3 player game. I'd play either of those any day of the week. But you add in the map, and it kind of adds, I've seen it add anyway, it necessarily shouldn't do, but it just seems to do it all the time, is add in that extra layer of AP. I don't even know if I want to call it AP, but it just kind of makes the game last a little bit longer. But I like the idea of it, and I enjoy it. I think it adds a lot to the game. It just seems like it pushes it out of that quick lunch game kind of thing, right? So it's just like too much, and then you're trying to squeeze it into like an hour, which maybe is unfair, but that's really the kind of game that it sort of presents itself as, is that sort of 1 hour game or less, really. And the Mediterranean expansion kind of pushes it over. But on the one side, I'm kind of split between that, because I really like having the map, and I like the whole sort of spraying for different colonies. You're trying to get the little small ones, you're trying to get the one that has a lot of goods and extra bonuses, so there's some real decision making there. But I would recommend it. So it's a nice casual game, and I think that's for me where it sort of fits, is the solitary aspect kind of kills it. Not the single player, but just the solitary nature of it. And the map sort of alleviates that quite a bit, but it doesn't really do enough of it, and it kind of makes it go a little bit longer. So it's really difficult to recommend it. It is a lot of fun though. It's very casual. So I think it's just a little bit lighter than I normally like. But I like the Civ theme, so that kind of grabs me, and I would definitely recommend it for like a more casual atmosphere, because it is fun. I like to tinker with it, and tinker with the rolls, and I like the new fate die and everything. So to me, it's a definite step up from the original, and this is one that I would happily play. Just as long as we had an hour or so to kill and really didn't feel like playing anything else, kind of thing. So anyway, definitely take a look at it. The Civ theme is what kind of makes me like it in the end, because I really enjoy that theme. But that is Roll Through Ages, the Iron Age. Thanks.